All right, thank you for joining everyone. We're really excited to have the first SUNY Library Research Showcase. We're hoping to share some amazing research projects that are being done across SUNY campuses. Some are being led in libraries, some are being involving libraries, but we hope to learn from a bunch of different campuses both today and tomorrow. I will let each presenter introduce themselves. And we're going to start today with folks from Buffalo State. So Buff State, if you want to take it over.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Julie Sattel, and I use they, them pronouns. And I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Hulsman, who uses he, him pronouns. And we're both librarians at SUNY Buffalo State. And we're here today to talk about diversity audits. We want to thank the SUNY Libraries Consortium, which funded my participation in the Library Journal course on diversity audits. We also want to thank our colleagues in the circulation department at Butler Library, especially Jeff Durr, for reshelving all the books. In our presentation today, we will briefly situate ourselves within the literature before moving on to focus in on diversity audits. In particular, we will discuss a series of diversity audits we conducted at Buffalo State of both our picture book collection and our nonfiction monograph collection. Over 30 years ago, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop wrote eloquently about books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors onto the world. She wrote, quote, "Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Books are sometimes windows, offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Reading then becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. For many years, non-white readers have too frequently found the search futile. Our goal as librarians is to build diverse and inclusive collections in which our users find themselves reflected and find windows onto other experiences. One tool that helps librarians to build diverse collections is a diversity audit. A diversity audit seeks to answer the questions: how well does the collection represent the nation's and/or our school's community? And how specifically are individuals from marginalized groups represented in the collection? When considering the representativeness of a collection, one must acknowledge the representativeness or lack thereof in publishing. There's been particular attention paid to this when it comes to literature published for children. The Cooperative Children's Book Center out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison analyzes diversity in children's publishing each year. They created this image to represent their data from 2018. More recent data is also available, but I like the infographic style of this one. As you can see, half of all main characters in children's books published in 2018 were white, followed by over a quarter of main characters who were animals, robots, or other non-human entities. According to this data, kids of color find themselves reflected in books at a disproportionately low rate. Embarking on a diversity audit at Buffalo State, we decided to initially focus on picture books because they are quick to read and assess. In 2022 and 2023, we conducted 3 waves of this audit, ultimately analyzing over 1,000 picture books by hand and finding that between 15 and 22% of picture books in our collection featured BIPOC main characters, that is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Beginning in 2023, we expanded the audit beyond the picture book collection to examine our nonfiction monograph collection using reverse audit methods.
So beginning with the curriculum materials lab, we decided to embark on this journey to figure out how we were going to create our sample size. Buffalo State has over 500,000 print books in the collection, so I think it would be pretty impossible for us to go through all of those. We decided to start with the 42,000 items that are in what we call our curriculum materials lab. Our curriculum materials lab is primarily used by our education department. It does have its own space in the library and its own holdings code. So we decided to take a look at building a sample from this collection. Using ALMA Analytics, and this is where Dr. Sattel partnered with our Information Management and Systems Department, which is what I'm a part of, to figure out how we were going to create our samples. Using ALMA Analytics, we were able to take a look at essentially what the publication year date range is of all of these 42,000 items. And you can see there was a little bit of a dip as we were heading into the pandemic. These numbers can be updated a little bit as we've actually been able to start buying in a more increased rate because of some of the data that we got from this audit. So what we decided to do was use Alma Primo to our advantage. And for all of those who are a part of SUNY libraries know that SUNY migrated to Alma Primo in 2019. I'm not going to get super technical. If you do have questions about how we put together some of these sets and how we ran filtering these sets, you can always contact me, but I'm just going to give a brief overview. What Alma can do is create sets of physical titles, electronic titles, and items. And this is how we kind of do batch changes throughout the course of collection development. We also do a lot of work locating kind of faulty MARC records. And what we do is use this thing called indication rules, which allows us to, in a granular way, search through MARC records to find items that may have specific types of mistakes. So for example, if you had a book that was missing the description field, the 520, we were able to run reports to locate those and add a 520. We also work very closely with our cataloger to find these records and fix them. So what we decided to do is filter to picture books in the curriculum materials lab. And using these indication rules, you can see there's a little example on the side. The indication rules do not modify any of the data, and it basically filters out a group or a set of titles using what we refer to as what is called Joule's logic. And what we were able to do is get a couple of different groups of sets of titles that we were going to run the audit on. So there's a big difference between how indication rules and searching with ALMA in the back end and how discovery searches. Obviously, discovery is much more focused on maximizing yield, whereas indication rules, we were looking at very, very specific data that is in the MARC records. And for the first collection that we ran through the audit, we used the subject 650 field, and we searched for anything that could have at least tagged the book as some kind of picture book. You can see the topical terms that we use there, and actually that's a screenshot of the rule. Picture books, pictorial works, picture puzzles, picture dictionaries. And after running this through all of our curriculum materials lab titles, we came to 1,145 titles and items. And using Excel, we just randomized 1 out of 4, which gave us a sample size of 282 titles. Julie's going to talk about how they went through each one of these titles manually to do the audit.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about 3 waves of our picture book diversity audits that we have completed. And the first one I'll call our homemade diversity audit. So I used collection number 1 sample, a total of 282 books, and reviewed each one individually, tallying up results in this immense Excel spreadsheet. Additional data slides are available separately, which we will put in the chat at the end. So here's just a snapshot of some of our data. For each title, I conducted internet research to identify the race and gender of the author, seeking to use authors' self-descriptions when available. For many authors, especially white authors, this information was not publicly available. So when it turned out that all of my research on a particular author was inconclusive, I ultimately resorted to phenotypic assessments using authors' photographs. For that reason, I feel less confident about the authorship portion of our data than I do about our main character data. So for each title, I also read the book, identifying whether or not it had a main character and identifying the race and gender of that main character. I use contextual clues as well as authors' descriptions of their characters on their websites, in interviews, and in other media to gather this information. Ultimately, we found that 15.5% of our picture book collection have BIPOC main characters. Completing this initial audit, we learned a lot. Reflecting on it, we noticed two major potential sources of error. First, our initial list of picture books may have been incomplete because we use the 650 field, and not all books that are actually picture books have that 650 field denoting them as a picture book. We might have missed some books. We were able to address this with our next collection. The other error was that potential for user error. When analyzing each individual title and assigning it to categories, I am very mindful of the fact that race and gender are slippery concepts, and to have an outsider sort of pinning people down or pinning people down in this way can be sort of problematic. This was partially addressed by having a single person analyze each title, so at least the error was consistent, and we weren't having some error by one person and some error by another person, and then not knowing sure which error was what.
So to create the sample for the audit 2 and audit number 3, we decided to move from the 650 field, which was essentially just topical term or subject, to the 655 field, which is the form or genre. And you can see there's the definition of what the 655 is, the subfield A, which is terms indicating the genre, form, and or physical characteristics of the materials being described. So we felt that this was a better marked field to search through, considering that we were looking for a form of book, which is picture books. We also filtered it to publication date of either greater than or equal to 2002. So this, after we ran through the initial list, we took a look at, we ended up getting 2,738 terms. And you can see here, once again, I don't want to get too technical here, but this is the rule that we actually used to make sure that if picture books existed in any of that field, and make sure that they were either Library of Congress subject headings or Children's Library of Congress subject headings, this gave us the 2,738.
And so with our second attempt at a diversity audit, we wanted to check our homemade work by comparing our results to that of a reputable organization, specifically Diverse Bookfinder. So Diverse Bookfinder is a collection of nearly 5,000 picture books that feature BIPOC characters. There's a new effort currently underway to expand beyond picture books as well. The physical collection is held at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, and they have a robust online database with a free collection analysis tool that allows you to easily compare your library's collections based on ISBNs with the Diverse Bookfinder collection. Notably, the Diverse Bookfinder collection seeks to decenter whiteness, going beyond simple head counts and getting into the nitty-gritty of how BIPOC characters are represented in the books that feature them. To compare our collection to Diverse Bookfinders, we needed a list of picture books again, this time only including books published between 2002 and the present to match DBF's collection. So this time we used that 655 mark record field to identify the books, developing a list of over 2,700 picture book titles and ISBNs, and then uploading those to Diverse Bookfinder. Within moments, we had a report that compared our collection to theirs and found that a little over 15% of our collection featured BIPOC characters. This is fairly close to the estimate we had made from the homegrown audit of 15.5%. So Diverse Bookfinder gave us some nice charts, which I'm going to go through way too fast, depicting who is represented in our collection, and then how that compares to the books that are available, and then specifically showing how BIPOC characters are represented in the books that we have. Next, having adjusted our methods in the second audit and having learned from Diverse Bookfinder, we sought to redo our homemade audit.
So once again, we used the 655 field and collection number 2, and we also used Excel to randomly select 2 out of the 7 titles to create a sample size of 782. Of those, 4 were not picture books, 4 were lost in our collection, and 1 was already discarded. Julie individually analyzed 773 circulating picture book titles from our collection, and these are some of the results.
So in this third audit, we again just have a couple slides here, but we have the more detailed slides in a minute we'll share with you. But in this third audit, we found a larger percentage of books with white authors, 85% as opposed to 77%. We also used updated racial categories that were used by the diverse bookfinder. And then for main character by race, we also find slightly less representation of non-human characters and slightly more representation of BIPOC characters, which you wouldn't necessarily expect from having more white authors, but that's what we found. And then for our last audit, we focus on our library's general adult nonfiction collection. To assess a non-children's nonfiction collection, we couldn't possibly read every book and categorize it. So instead, we turned to reverse audit or checklist methods, where we basically identify a list of books that we would generally want to collect. In this case, books that were recipients of diversity-related awards in their respective academic disciplines. And then we check to see whether we or another SUNY library had those titles in our collection. To develop the list of awards, we were aided by 2 scholarly articles in which these methods were practiced. These articles identified a total of 56 diversity-related awards, and then I found another 140 such awards, and I could probably keep finding more if I keep looking. To keep this project manageable, we focused only on awards given to books, and only awards that were given by either scholarly associations, universities, or nonprofits, so not publishers seeking to just boost their own publications. With the aim of starting small, we began by collecting data on the titles that won the awards in our list, focusing only on the most recent 3 years, no earlier than 2019. Given my background in sociology, we began by examining social science. We identified 96 diversity-related awards and then identified 646 unique titles that won those awards over a 3-year period since 2018. 38 titles were duplicates, meaning that they were books that had won multiple awards. On the left, you can see the data for the 646 unique titles. We found that Buff State has 29% of those titles, and another SUNY library has an additional 42%, with the remaining 29% not in any SUNY collection. On the right is the data for the duplicate titles. We expected that those titles would be more likely to be held by Buff State or another SUNY than the unique titles, and the data bore that out. We still have a lot of work to do on this nonfiction audit, but these are our preliminary results. So the homemade diversity audits were quite surface level, asking simply, is there any representation? The diverse bookfinder audit, by contrast, gets more into the details, asking what kind of representation is there. We have begun targeting our ordering to fill the gaps that this project identified in our picture book collection. Given that more than half of our students are people of color, we are not satisfied with a 15% or even 22% figure, but we now know that number as our baseline from which to improve for picture books. For the general nonfiction collection, we are still determining what an appropriate benchmark is. That is, what percentage of books should Buffalo State or SUNY have? Of course, we are also expanding the reverse audit methods beyond just social science. If anyone is interested in collaborating with us on this project, please definitely reach out. Thank you.
Thanks. And if folks have questions, you can throw them in the chat. We still have a few minutes before we need to transition to our next presenters. Anna did have a question, if you can see, yeah, about unique titles.
Yeah, unique titles is just only appearing once in the collection, as opposed to duplicate titles, which received multiple awards. So unique titles were just a book that won one award, as opposed to a book that won multiple awards. And Chris is getting our data slides and our all of our links ready for you.
And it looks like Fred's got his hand up. Fred, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, this is really some incredibly interesting data that you've collected. I'm first on Fred Stoss at the University of Buffalo, one of the science librarians. Um, I've got a very, very strong background in environmental sciences, both from a research perspective prior to becoming a librarian and 40 some odd years as a librarian. One of the organizations to which I belong is the New York State Outdoor Education Association. And NIOSIA has been addressing these very issues about ethnicity within the outdoor education community in New York State, especially with the emphasis of trying to get students much more involved in outdoor activities. And I've done a couple of presentations on resources for educators, including children's books on nature, outdoor, and environmental themes. And boy, would it be interesting to see how your methodology could be used to do the exact same thing in terms of finding out who are more profiles of the authors, the main characters and themes of the book, um, especially with a slight emphasis, I would say, on climate change, because some of the research that I've done shows that Latinx and uh, uh, African American, Black um, resources um, tend to show that they have a higher concern for things related to climate change than do a broad spectrum of. If you took a look at the total population, they come to the top by, in some cases, 12 to 15% higher rates of concern. Maybe it's because they live in areas that are being impacted much more so than I guess I would say our traditional environments where we think of sometimes we don't think enough of what's happening in the urban settings. And this is just on outdoor, and you're not even including things like lead poisoning and water quality issues in urban areas. So I'm really nice to see that you're doing this kind of work, and I ought to come over sometime and take a look a little bit more finally and talk to you guys about this. So great work.
Yeah, we'd love to have
Great.
you. We'd love to show you around. And yeah, I think the methodology can be applied. The methodology that I applied in the homemade diversity audit was one that I learned from the library journal course that I took, thanks to SUNY Libraries Consortium. And so that's a model that could definitely be applied to any sort of collection where you could actually read the books. Again, the authorship stuff is a bit trickier to do than the main character stuff. Authorship is just more challenging. Since completing the first part of the audit, I have volunteered with Diverse Book Finder and as part of their metadata community of practice. And so I've learned the methods that they use to code books, and I've learned their methods around especially identifying authors by race and ethnicity, and making sure to do so sort of only if it's self-described. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also just thinking that in addition to NYSOIA, that it's called STANIS, the Science Teachers Association for New York State, would also have, I think, a tremendous interest in taking a look at children's young adult science-oriented texts, especially as we are facing some downturns in terms of students feeling that they're not adequately prepared to go into STEM fields, and trying to stimulate students' interest at the lower, even in elementary grades, of getting them stimulated to be thinking along these terms, and then having them going into college programs at a later date. So it's another subset of what you're doing, of taking a look at children's book
Mhm.
literature in whole, but it has some very, very practical applications.
Yeah, definitely. The more that you can see yourself represented in the books that you're reading, in the teachers in the classrooms in front of you, the more you can see yourself in those positions as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think this work would be appreciated by a really broad audience. I could see, not just higher ed, but certainly public libraries and K-12 libraries,
Mhm.
who want to work toward the same goals. So any last questions for Chris and Julie? All right, thank you so much. I'm going to pause our recording. All right, welcome back. Our next presentation is from SUNY Fredonia, and I will let our presenters take it away.
Well, if we're going to introduce ourselves, while Mandy gets started, I'll chime in. I'm John Staples. I'm a professor of European history here at SUNY Fredonia, and thanks for letting a historian crash your conference. Mandy.
Hi, I'm Mandy Shep. I'm the coordinator of special collections and archives at Reed Library. So it's a fun department. It's a neat facet of the library, and this has been exciting to work on. You want me to go ahead and get started, John?
Yeah, go for it.
Lovely. I am a sort of unique situation. So I work in special collections and archives. I'm also one of the librarians here. Part of my librarian duties are also, in addition to special collections and archives, I also run the 3D printer. So I do a lot of interdisciplinary stuff in general. And that's kind of why I started this path of thinking, how can I do more interdisciplinary stuff with the archives? Like there's so much cool stuff in here. We have such a really fascinating campus with all of these like niche professors, and they teach these really cool like hyper subject classes. And we have to have stuff in there. That's the whole point of collecting these things, correct? Like we need to have cool stuff that we can show people. So I do a lot of discovery in processing and reprocessing the collections, like figuring out what we have. One of the main things I've done here is refaceting a lot of the collections so that they're more findable and more describable. Originally, it was just 1 through 99, and that doesn't help me find anything for anybody. So yeah. So the recollection that we're going to be talking about today, I am very grateful to have a lot of really cool faculty on campus like John here that are interested in the weird, wacky stuff that I find in the archives, and are willing to show this to students and engage classes with these materials, because it can be a challenge of archives if you have stuff that doesn't really apply to the classes that you get or the students that you get that are interested. So one of the collections here that we worked on in reprocessing, it was only folder level when I started. Some of it was box level, and I'm like, all right, this is a huge collection. We gotta do better. We gotta find what is actually in this. So in going through his correspondence and reprocessing it at item level, it was more really, really interesting in terms of, man, this guy knew a lot of people, and he wrote to a lot of people, and he just kind of has his fingers in all sorts of pies, and like, what a fascinating man. And then you start digging through more of his correspondence and realize what an incredible life he had. He's a professor of German here in the 60s. He is also the reason that Fredonia has the Zweig collection. So the Stefan Zweig papers are one of our most prominent collections that we have. We get a lot of international researchers for it. And it's basically because this man was family friends with them. So we get a lot of that, but you don't want the cool famous person collection to eclipse the cool guy that got us that collection. So let's learn a little bit more about him. So digging through his papers, he's a lawyer, he's a writer, he's a researcher, he's a scholar, he's a prolific creator of content. He's also a Jewish exile. He's just a quirky guy, and you can tell from the way he's communicating in a lot of his correspondence. And really, like, digging through these things made me absolutely fall in love with him as just a historical person. He's so fascinating, and he's this dude out of time, and I just had to share it with somebody. And I am incredibly grateful that John is so interested in weird niche people like I am. Like, check this guy out, he's so cool. And he absolutely did and jumped into it.
My turn?
Oh yeah, you could take it from here. I'm so
Okay.
excited.
So I want to talk a little bit about my own discovery of Robert Ree, and working with some students in the archive. I'd sort of come across him with the help of Mandy, and took a bit of an interest in him, and in particular in a bit of his collection. I'll talk about a bit later. But in the spring of 2023, I had a sabbatical that I devoted entirely to reading through Ree's materials. And there are a lot of them, by the way. I think it's 46 archival boxes of materials, Mandy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, and a couple packages.
Yeah. So the first thing that just really hooked me on Robert Ree was his unpublished 1939 memoir called Europa Müde, which a bad translation would be something like Tired of Europe or The Exhausted by Europe or something like that. And it recounts at great length Ree's kind of desperate March 1938 flight from Austria. On the last train out of Austria after the Nazis annexed Austria, it recounts his 9 traumatic months living in France that summer, and finally his immigration to the United States in December 1938. And I spent last spring and summer reading and selectively translating and contextualizing documents, partially this memoir, but a bunch of other documents too, which led to discussions with Mandy. In the end, we've decided that we want to publish a collaborative kind of life in documents about Ree. So to give you a sense of what is captivating about the document, I'm going to talk about just one short excerpt from Die Opermude, which I've entitled The Dream. And it's Ree was arrested and imprisoned in Paris in November 1938 as an undocumented migrant, which, by the way, is a sign of Ree's relevance for the United States in 2024, I think, as well as for the history of Nazism. So in that account of his time in prison, he writes of a dream he had, of a conversation with a mouse in his cell. And it's clear that the mouse is representative for him of French attitudes towards Austria, and particularly Jewish migrants fleeing for their lives from Austria to France. And so Ree, in this brief section of the memoir, complains to the mouse. He complains about his unfair treatment by the French justice system. And I'll just read you the mouse's reply. The mouse responds, "If you are so uncomfortable complying with official French regulations, why don't you go back to your own country? I'm sure that the Gestapo, which is now working so happily in Vienna, would deal with you much more swiftly than our magistrates." Now that line, "why don't you go back to your own country," just it resonates, doesn't it? It resonates. So what I encountered in the Europa Muda, and what I encountered throughout this collection of documents, is that they are incredibly evocative and full of powerful imagery. And Mandy's going to talk then a bit more about the collection in general.
So, in the collection in general, look at that. Yeah. So in the collection in general, he's got a significant amount of correspondence as well as his papers. And the correspondence is really something I love in archival collections. It's the most telling portion. It gives you a really clear idea of who people are. I feel like people are always their barest selves in their communications, especially Ree. He just kind of put it all out there and it didn't really matter. So here on the left side, the document is National Coordinating this morning. It's a document from the National Coordinating Committee for Aid to Refugees from Immigrants Coming from Germany. He is writing on behalf of one of his friends who was captured and imprisoned in a camp and trying to lobby for his release. He also used his social connections to kind of do that as well. The letter in the middle is a letter from him to Stefan Zweig while he is still relocating himself. He's made it from Paris to New York, but he's asking Stefan for help, seeing how he's doing with his exile journey as well, and kind of just discussing this whole experience that they're all collectively having as a people. And then for fun, on the right, because it's a fun collection as well as a sometimes heavy collection, and that's why I love it so much, is a request for chocolates. This man has 3 separate huge files of correspondence from chocolate companies because he used to just sell, like, send bonbons to pretty much everyone he knew. And there's a lot of interesting varieties in there, like chocolate matzo is a thing he favored. So I find it funny. You don't think about staunch professors and people with these impressive legal titles just having an extreme candy habit. So it's kind of fun. And then one of the most significant pieces of correspondence that we have in this collection is a significant correspondence between Rhee and Paul Klopfer. And it's some of the most interesting, beautiful correspondence ever. And I think this is truly what made John and I both just magnetically attract to this collection, because it's so unusual and it's so gorgeous and there's nothing quite like it. Like once in a while you find the odd one letter with a drawing on it or something cute and interesting in a slew of correspondence, but every single letter having some gorgeous embellishment is a real rarity. And it's something that deserves to be viewed and experienced. It really does.
So I'm going to say a little bit more about Paul Klopfer. And Klopfer was the guy who originally brought me to this collection. So he's this fascinating character, a longtime friend of Robert Rhee. He was a German architect associated with the Bauhaus movement. He was actually played a small but important role at the founding of the Bauhaus movement. Some of you are no doubt aware the Bauhaus is the most important architectural movement of the 20th century. He was also the director of Germany's oldest and most important trade school. And I guess part of what makes him so interesting is he was also a principled opponent of the Nazis. When he was fired from his job and briefly imprisoned in 1933 when he refused to fly the Nazi flag over the school. He was then forced into retirement on a half pension and would struggle through to the end of World War II, just trying to survive. By now, he was in his 60s. In one of his letters, a wonderful letter to Rhee, he wrote about his arrest and imprisonment. And I mean, he said in it, and this is another one of those lines that always catches me. He said, "And then the darkness descended." And it captures this period of his life, this dark period. So Klopfer and his wife, Johanna, who I think features in important ways in the collection as well, eked out this kind of really desperate, meager existence until the end of World War II. And then he kind of resumed his life and gained a little bit of prominence as a speaker about the Bauhaus in other ways. So again, he had been a friend of Rhee since at least 1930, we learned from the letters. But our correspondence stretches from 1946, when they reconnected after the war, until 1966, when Klopfer died. And what we get here is this wonderful account of his own struggles under Nazi rule. But equally, as Mandy has already indicated, we get something else. And I think next slide, Mandy. I think the thing that gives the Klopfer correspondence particular appeal to everyone who encounters it, including students who, when they see it, they love this stuff, even though they can't read it, is that Klopfer was a talented amateur artist. And most of his letters are decorated with either a watercolor painting or a pencil crayon sketch, or something along that line. So these are 4 lovely examples. The one on the left, the text reads in part, please stop showering us with chocolates. And Mandy showed the receipt for candies that Ree had. Ree loved to send candies to his friends on all kinds of important occasions. And so there are huge wads of receipts from chocolate companies throughout the correspondence. And the image here is kind of this delightful, whimsical image of chocolates raining down and Paul Klopfer with an umbrella protecting himself from them. By the way, if some of you might notice, I mean, it's signed Paul and Vanna. Vanna was Johanna, but it was probably painted by Johanna, because by the time this letter was written, Paul was going blind, and she picked up the art. And her art has its own unique character too. It's actually some of the best art in the collection. The center one is Paul and Johanna looking up at the moon. Now, I was tempted to say they were looking at an eclipse, but they weren't. It's just them looking at the moon. The bottom one is a view from the backyard of their house in the village of Lorch, where they lived. And the right one is a fun one in interesting ways. Paul Klopfer liked landscape painting, and he did a lot of landscape painting. But this one is a little different because what you can detect in the foreground, in the background is the village of Lorch where they lived. In the foreground is a dead milkman floating in the Rems River, which seems a little weird, I know. But here's the thing about it, and it's just part of the kind of ongoing, fun, lighthearted exchange that you get between these 2 guys, is that Klopfer had complained bitterly in a previous letter about his terrible milkman that was never showing up with the milk. And so Klopfer writes back to him with this image and says in the letter, there, I looked after the milkman for you. And this is kind of, one of those things that appears in the letters, this kind of ongoing exchange. So last summer, after I had translated this, the dream, which seemed so powerful to me, I asked Mandy if she thought there was a way to incorporate some artwork into our intended publication. And what I really meant by this is I meant original art graphically reflecting Ree's dream. I didn't mean these letters at all, but Mandy, I think, saw an opportunity and ran with it here to do much, much more, to work with students in creative ways. So Mandy.
So I have a regular art class that comes into the archives. We work prominently with our visual arts and new media department. We have an art collection here, a print collection. So I try and collaborate and have students in the archives to look at the art, please look at it. Someone give it some purpose. So we have a book arts class that comes in regularly because we have a number of artist books and special collections with artist bindings and artist books. So it's kind of nice to get students to come in. I also have a historical teaching collection of super broken books with really ugly bindings that folks can really look at and kind of dig into, and it doesn't really matter. So it's nice to give them that hands-on experience. But their professor is also, he was raised in Germany, so he's got some familiarity with Ree and Klopfer, and he was also interested in this weird collection and this fun story. So we talked a little bit about, would they like to do something else? Or is there another class that we could talk about to do something interesting with this? And the book arts professor also teaches monotypes and monoprints. So he was fascinated with the Klopfer correspondence as soon as I showed him a few pieces. And he was absolutely taken with the entire thing and said, how can we do this? And I explained, well, I'm working with someone from the history department, and he's doing some translations, and maybe we could kind of get together and see if this takes off with students. And told him a bit more about John and I's idea to write a life in documents with some highlights and having maybe a graphic element that kind of puts some emotion behind the feeling in these documents. And he was all about it. He absolutely thought it was a really cool idea, and he was very, very into it. So the following semester, he brought in his monotypes class, and they spent a session with the Cloper correspondence and select pieces from Marie's collection to get a better idea of who this man is as a human being. So these are some of the pieces that they looked at. That I love this cat. Cloper and his wife also do a lot of like floral still lifes and things like that. And then this is a bird associated with New Year's. It appears in a lot of their drawings. So it's a common little bird. So then the students, after spending time with the artwork, they went and looked through the collection. They included some pieces of digitized scans of the collection as part of their prints because it was required that there be an archival element to this. So we have the cat from the drawing on the left that's been repainted and reproduced here. This is also a different postcard that's featured in the collection. The rat in the center is part of the Die Europamoed document. It was translated into English, and that's what the stripes on the rat are, is the text from the document. And then over on the right, we see this lovely abstract kind of birdie, kind of skeletal sort of deal with text from some of the letters, as well as the Cicero, the New Year bird. So it really came out so beautifully and so interesting. And then we managed to put it all together in a lovely exhibit. This is a top down of one of the cases. Here is the letter that inspired it on the left, along with the actual artwork on the right, and the chocolate letter that we've seen with the chocolate letter inspired by the artwork, or the artwork inspired by the chocolate letter. We also included translations of the documents that were in German, as well as artist statements, so that we could kind of get the full perspective from the students on what they were doing. John, if you want to take over.
Okay, and I know we're up against the clock, so I'll be very brief, but I wanted to just say that when I saw these student works, I have to say they were absolutely nothing like what I expected. I mean, I kind of expected something in the vein of Art Spiegelman's Mouse, right? That's what I imagined in my own brain. But what I got was just this powerful new perspective on these documents that I'd never imagined. I mean, students saw meanings that I didn't imagine. I mean, there's a work of art in this group that focuses on attacks on trans people in the United States today. And the student made this connection between a Jew fleeing the Nazis in 1938 and the repression of trans people in 2023. I think it says something powerful about how the past can be connected to the present for students, but also for me. So I'll leave it there and turn it back to you, Mandy, because I think we really are up against the clock now.
That's totally fine. So this semester, we're sort of taking a different approach with this. We're using the Cloper and Ree correspondence again, because it's just so fascinating and there's so much rich content in there that students can interpret in such a variety of ways. So we're doing a lot more focus on hands-on history, active learning experiences. This semester, John's students are creating an archival exhibit with materials from the collections and their interpretations and how these things all kind of connect with each other to tell a story in documents. I do a lot of active learning, hands-on teaching. A lot of our materials are German, and we no longer have a German program, sadly. So I try and make sure that there's an equal emphasis on materiality as well as content, because the objects themselves are also important, as well as what is in them and written in them. Heritage materials can appeal pretty widely to different disciplines for different reasons, and it's sort of my job to connect those people together, as well as connecting them to materials that they want. And I feel like this really is leading to an increase in awareness of and interest in our collections, as well as heightened access. If you have any closing points, John, you go right ahead, and then I'm happy for questions.
Let's turn to questions. I'm happy.
All right, thanks. If folks have questions, you can feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute. I think it's really exciting to get students working with archives. Like you said, Mandy, I think there's this amazing stuff there that only you know about. No one engages with it, and it's disappointing. So when they do that's really exciting, and it's awesome that they turned it into their own project. So great work.
Yeah, it's lovely to see how they latch on to certain pieces that we would never even think about. It really speaks to the true beauty of interpreting history and that everyone gets something different out of it.
I would add to that, as somebody who's using these documents, teaching history, that I think there's a kind of moment for the archives here as a result of AI. I mean, you know, as we're struggling with trying to figure out how to teach history in new ways, the archives provide us with this set of materials that AI hasn't been trained on, which means that the students, in order to use them, have no choice but to use their own fully genuine intelligence to deal with the documents in the classroom, which is great. It's exciting for the students. It's exciting for me, and it's producing some marvelous work. And also in venues like creating an exhibit in the library that we might not traditionally have done.
Yeah, the exhibit looked very cool. And we'd love if you could share your slides that we can share them out
Oh, absolutely.
widely with the recording. So you're getting some kudos in the chat. Any last questions? We still have a few minutes. I'm going to just, all right, we've resumed recording, and Jocelyn, you can take it away and introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jocelyn Swick-Jemison. I am the data services librarian here at the University of Buffalo. I am the first and currently only data services librarian. So I've been in this role for about a year. I've been at UB itself for about 6 years now. So what my research, and this is an ongoing project, kind of an ongoing documentation of what I am going through right now, the trials and tribulations of creating a data services department at a large R1 university. It's basically, it hasn't been published yet. This poster that I'm showing you right now, I actually used for an RDAT presentation a couple weeks ago. So this has just been the process. So it's titled, Are We on the Same Page? So coming into this role, like I said, I'm the first librarian of this kind at UB. And I was tasked with essentially defining what it means to be a data services librarian at UB and what a data services department would look like. So I don't know if I really realized coming into the position exactly how difficult it would be to figure out exactly what happens with research data on UB's campus. And what I came to find out is that nobody really knows what happens with research data on UB's campus. And so as part of planning a data services department within the libraries, I really had to establish kind of lines of communication where there hadn't been none in the past. Everything is very siloed. So I kind of had to figure out on my own what goes where and who does what. And trust me, this is still very much ongoing process. So a few of the obstacles or challenges that I've faced. Number one being the idea that data services might not even belong within the libraries. Some other challenges being establishing boundaries and faculty wanting me to take on tasks that are beyond my job scope, and a lack of visibility. Just the idea that people don't know that I'm here. They don't know what a data services librarian does or how I can help them. So in this whole process, so back in September, we were presented with the opportunity to join the All of Us research program, library research engagement program. If you're not familiar with the All of Us program, there's a link down on the bottom of my poster there. the All of Us research program is a nationwide research program sponsored by the NIH, and with the goal of recruiting up to 1 million people to submit their medical health records, their possibly their DNA, and to complete different surveys about their health and their lives, to collect data into this big data set that can then be used to draw larger medical and social conclusions from. So basically, big data, more like what you might see in Europe with a more socialized medicine model. But it's all voluntary, and it's called All of Us because the goal is to have a large portion, if not a majority of this data set, be representative of people who are otherwise underrepresented in medical research. So we know that most medical research is based on white men. So the goal of this project is to have women and people of color, people with disabilities, people of all walks of life participating in this research, submitting their data so that other researchers can come in and use that then anonymized data to find new information. So this is a huge national project. They were rolling out this capacity building program to create data engagement activities at universities across the United States. We were one of 10 universities chosen to participate, which we were awarded this in the fall of 2023. It's a year-long program with a $40,000 award along with it. And so in my first 6-7 months in the position, just kind of trying to piece together what was going on with data on campus, I was then presented with this amazing opportunity. And through this grant program, we are required to promote and engage with researchers on campus with the All of Us data set. So to me, this presented as a really good opportunity to use this project, the All of Us project, as a vehicle, a path forward to establishing the relationships and the lines of communication with other people interested in research data on campus. So my challenges, I now have a vehicle to address those challenges. My paths forward being the All of Us trainings that we are currently creating and promoting, using the All of Us model as a model of engagement, introduction to resources, introduction to data science training, as well as a place to facilitate research collaborations across departments. So within this, excuse me, I've been participating in a campus-wide research data steering committee, and leading on other data management authorities on campus to carve out a place for data in the libraries. As far as addressing things that may be outside of my job scope, the boundaries of the All of Us program have allowed me to establish exactly what I am able and not able to do, emphasizing that my role is one of education, not of administration. And the program itself has open conversations with invested parties to clearly establish these roles. It's also given me the opportunity to open up a line of communication with campus IT entities. And again, use that All of Us project model, librarian as facilitator, not administrator. And then lack of visibility. This has been a huge help, and I hope it will continue to be, to bring visibility to the data services department. We have a big event coming to the campus at the end of the month for the All of Us project, which hopefully will be able to do lots of promotion, get lots of people excited about both using the data set as researchers, but also possibly signing up to contribute their own data to the data set. So that's been my journey so far. It's going to be a long journey, and I think I'm still just at the beginning of it. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
That's great. Thank you, Jocelyn. And we have about a minute and a half if folks want to throw any questions in the chat. Fred's got his hand up. Go ahead, Fred.
Hi, Fred.
Oh, Fred, you're muted. I don't know.
Hey, Fred, are you muted?
It double hits. I said, hi, Joycelyn, it's nice to see another UB face. Have you reached out to any of the non-medical STEM disciplines that have various requirements for reporting their data to either national or international data centers? And I'm thinking of the NCBI for archiving all of their genomic resources, and in geology, some of the people that are contributing their data to the national glaciological data centers and the such.
Yeah, I haven't yet. Being that I'm based in the health sciences library, as you know, my focus has really been on those researchers who go through the NIH. I've dealt a little bit with some of the National Science Foundation grants as well. But yeah, this is a big, it's a big task in that the pushes for things like data sharing are going to be coming from all of the the grant giving entities. So my goal with that, and take note, Fred, because is to teach all of our liaison librarians to get them more involved with data and data sharing and the mechanisms behind that, so that they can support their departments when it comes to that. As of right now, I am one person, so I am NIH focused. But yeah, the goal is, again, is definitely with education, and kind of setting up almost a triage model of go to your liaison librarian first. If it goes beyond that, then you send them to me.
All right. And Jocelyn, we're gonna wrap this up.
Yes, thank
so that
you.
Our next group can present. Thank you. That was great. And I did just throw in the chat a virtual workshop that OLIS is co-sponsoring this summer with Eslin, if you're interested. And Jocelyn, just wanted to point out you've inspired Jenica to start another project.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. And our next presenters are from Rockport. If they can pull up the screen share. I see Jennifer here.
Yes, I'm here. I'm going to do the screen share.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yep, we can see that. And you may take it away, Jennifer and Mary Jo. Please introduce yourselves as well.
Okay, Mary Jo, are you here?
I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
We're in two different we're in two different places, but we're together. So, yes, I'm trying to move the screen so I can see it. There we go. All right, so, excuse me, my name is Jennifer Kegler, and I am a research and instruction librarian at SUNY Brockport. Mary Jo, you're muted.
Mary Jo Orzik, Scholarly Communications Librarian at Brockport.
And today our presentation is about promoting and assessing the use of OERs in college courses. And our learning objectives are to learn how librarians have partnered with faculty and instructional designers to adopt OER into courses. And part of the reason we submitted this is because we also intend to show the scholarship and research produced from these collaborations.
We hope it will inspire some of you and get some of you thinking. Just so we're all on the same plane, we're just a quick reminder that we're talking about open educational resources. These are the educational materials that are in the public domain or have been released under an open license and permit access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others. Some of the key points for OER are the idea that it increases affordability for our students. That's been reported very frequently as our students' most valued point of using OER. It also allows day one access for students who may not otherwise always have access to the materials from the first day of classes. For faculty, oops.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know what I hit.
It's all right. It also, for faculty, of course, it also allows for additional flexibility to customize and tailor their courses for particular audiences and communities. And it provides wider resources than may be available in a single commercial textbook. So a whole host of variety of different kinds of materials can be included. It also enables a use of authors to consider things like Creative Commons, where they can consider their licensing rights, and they can allow for open access or retention of some of the permissions of the materials that are created. Next slide. At this point, we're going to turn it over back to Jennifer, because she's going to give us an example of one of these great collaborations with our faculty. Take it away, Jennifer.
Yes. So obviously we promote OERs in many courses, but a lot of what I have been able to do is working with faculty who are in COIL courses, which are collaborative online international learning courses. I have partnered with faculty in the journalism, broadcasting, and public relations department, special education, and kinesiology courses. And one of the reasons this got started was one of those faculty came to me and said, I can't find a research guide about countries and cultures, and how am I going to teach these students range from freshmen through graduate students, but we need a place to start. So I created a research guide for that course, and it then was adopted across several of the courses that are COIL courses. And one of the concepts we also teach in probably the education and journalism courses, the iceberg concept of culture. And the students were pretty good at getting to the surface culture and kind of describing what was going on in the countries they were working with, but they had a tougher time getting into the deep culture and some of the different rules and biases you might see there. So in working with these classes, they partner with faculty across the world. So I have had these faculty working with students and other courses in countries, the Netherlands, Brazil, Ukraine, United Kingdom, several different countries. But the advantage for our students is that they get to meet students from other countries and then work with them on joint projects. These projects vary quite a bit across discipline, but this is something that helps them develop a little more intercultural competency, which is one of our institutional student learning outcomes. And excuse me, it also it's just been eye-opening for some of them. I think one experience that stands out with me the most is working with students in the Ukraine when the Ukraine war started. Those students were offline, but they then came back online. Sometimes they would have to leave because of bomb shelter drills and whatnot. But they were pretty persistent, and our students learned a lot about Ukraine, but also about persistence, and just it kind of brought home the war to them, and that really is happening, even though we're here in Brockport and things are seemingly safe and safe and easy in a certain sense to live and all that sort of thing. So from these partnerships, and I can go into more detail on that, although Mary Jo and I have presented on that a couple of times. But what has occurred, the partnerships across campus have been wonderful. I've been able to work with the COIL group, actually set up their own committee where anyone who teaches in COIL, we meet monthly to talk about experiences and what's going on there and to talk about research results. Some of those faculty have published their own projects. I have worked with several faculty and have shared some of our research results, including changing the course or different things we've added or taken away. So I've done a lot of conference presentations and especially campus and online webinars, but it also has resulted in us publishing peer-reviewed journal articles and several book chapters. So it's kind of opened up the research opportunities for me just by collaborating with them outside of the library. And I'm going to pass the next part to Mary Jo.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as Jennifer is mentioning, a lot of these examples, they do include a whole host of OER really does open up a whole host of additional ways that people can think about data collection. The librarians can partner with instructors for data collection related that may include comparative as well as longitudinal kinds of research, qualitative, quantitative, mixed model kinds of studies, anecdotal kinds of things we've been finding through focus groups as well as surveys. We've been doing this for a while now, and the various disciplines bring so much, the kinds of results that the students and faculty have clued us into have been really quite eye-opening in a whole host of variety of ways. And if you see the literature as it's developed in OER, you can see how many different ways people have really considered in K-12 all the way through higher ed, how open educational materials allow new ways of considering new forms of scholarship, new delivery models. As Jennifer mentioned, the Ukrainian exchange and international exchange has been a wonderful offshoot of this. We've had the Ukrainian faculty visit Brockport and really bring those stories home to us in some very powerful ways for our students that they would not have had that connection with otherwise. And by making these materials they're teaching openly available, it's really been a very, very powerful. Again, as Jennifer's mentioning, the whole area of cultural sensitivity, consideration of other countries, and cultural intercultural competency overall has been something that we may not have come to otherwise. The librarians may not have necessarily come to this in terms of an area for scholarship and research. It also includes lots of opportunities for students' involvement, of course, as creators, as reviewers, as testers of each other's kinds of materials and so on. So there's lots of opportunity for their inclusion as well. It certainly spills over from open educational resources to open pedagogy. And that's been a real push in the way things seem to be moving more and more these days. It certainly allows for the continuous improvement in terms of our teaching and scholarship, and the whole area of scholarship of teaching and learning overall can be enhanced and improved through the consideration of OER. Next. So we're about ready to wrap up. We just wanted to tell you there's been lots of examples that our librarians have been able to partner with faculty that may not have come about otherwise. And we're certainly open to other questions, either offline or, or at this time as well.
All right, thank you, Mary Jo and Jennifer. We're going to maybe move on to our next lightning round, but we can probably stay on the chat afterwards if folks do have questions.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing all that, and we'll share out your slides that include all these awesome publications you've done around your work. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm getting some claps from the audience. So our next and final presentation for today is Catherine Stoller-Peters from OLIS. And Catherine, are you able to screen share? We can see that. And you can take it away. Oh, and Catherine, you're muted. I'm not sure if you're speaking.
You can tell I've been listening. I'm very excited to be the third person presenting in our lightning round today because what I'm discussing is very similar to what Jocelyn and our two presenters from Brockport have also presented. It's about openness, open data, open educational resources. And for us, I want to share a little bit about an open project that we're doing, an open tool that will support research data sharing. And before I get too far, I want to share with you the link to the tool so that you can take a look as I'm chatting. So today, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our work with RDAF, the Research Data Framework. I'll tell you a little bit about our data model and what's going on at SUNY. So here for us at SUNY, coming from the SUNY administration perspective, we are interested in research data created from and produced by SUNY research, data about SUNY produced research, and data reused in SUNY research. This is fundamental to our efforts as a system and as individual campuses. And I did forget to introduce myself. I'm Catherine Steller-Peters. I work at the SUNY OLIS. I'm the Associate Director of Assessment and Data Analysis. And I wanted to mention that for SUNY administration, our total research expenditures currently are over $1 billion, 1 billion with the B, and the governor of the state of New York and our SUNY chancellor share a goal of doubling those research expenditures in the near future. So I'd like to share with you the work our SUNY libraries are doing to contribute and support that work. One of the things we've been doing is partnering with a group in the federal government, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a premier pioneering research resource for researchers, usually in the physical sciences domain. They're very excited because they just were able to create a standard for the kilogram in a way that was not just a physical object. They've been able to turn it into code that they use with a particular scale. So they're very much about standards. And in fall of 2019, they launched the Research Data Framework. They're currently in the second version of it. For them, the Research Framework is a tool that you can use to customize your strategy for working with data. It includes 50 topics and 335 subtopics. It is dense, it's comprehensive, and it's one of the best frameworks for considering research. And it's helpful for us as librarians to look at the research data lifecycle because it includes this top component of Envision. So not just thinking about research as individual projects, but how they can be connected in larger institutions. Within SUNY, there has been increased interest in research data management due to federal funding requirements. A recent the Office of Science and Technology policy memo, interest in open science, interest in AI opportunities built on open data or other proprietary data. From that, OLIS started a research data management task group. We have participants in that task group from the Research Foundation, Buffalo, Stony Brook, Albany, Binghamton, Upstate, System Administration. We have representatives from IT offices, the Office of Sponsored Programs, and we recently, last year, we conducted an environmental scan. We determined that we needed some more guidance on roles and responsibilities. We needed to do a little bit more work on research data management. Through this, we've developed a project, and we have noted a lot of activities going on in particular campuses. We just heard about one from the University of Buffalo, where they're working on building their data sciences and data services supports. Other campuses are doing the same thing through an Ithaca S&R study on a data support services study. That's Binghamton, Stony Brook, and UAlbany are working on that. There's quite a lot of work being done, creating LibGuides, training efforts, and work with ORCID. Within SUNY, we see that data management and sharing plans have been a driving force in this work from those federal funder requirements from organizations like the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health. There are a lot of differing approaches on campus, but we're starting to think about a shared or some sort of larger infrastructure. There is a project submitted for research data management to the Digital Transformation Project to spend $200 million provided by the state to SUNY. I wanted to note that all 3 STRIVE task forces in OREAD have called out research data management and just data management as a gap. What I find most important about the conversations that are going on in all of these groups with vice presidents of research and at the SUNY level is consistently, I hear we cannot do this without the libraries. And this has been the greatest statement I've heard in any of these presentations, and I wanted to share it with you. SUNY librarians are doing a lot of work with the data infrastructure and training and determining how to support services. I only have 2 more minutes. I want to take a minute to show our project team. We have a larger research data management task group, but there have been a number of people on the system working in this project. Their names are listed here. They've been doing an incredible job, and I really appreciate it. And what I wanted to note is oftentimes as librarians, we spend our time in the plan, share, use, and reuse stage, the preserve and discard stage of the research data framework. But we have put together a tool at SUNY administration based on this RDAF framework in order to spend some time in the Envision section. So within our project, we noted that the RDAF is great, but it has some limitations. We were able to remap RDAF stages, topics, and subtopics. RDAF is built in the black. Our work has been the blue part. We've been able to tease apart relationships in those topics and subtopics. And let's get to the interesting part. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to show you my tool. Let me see if I can pull it over here. I only have 1 minute. I'm always happy to talk about this. So I would absolutely love if anybody wanted to ask questions either by email or in the chat. You should be able to see this tool. So we've taken all the stages of the research data framework, envision, plan, generate, and acquire, and a couple of other project-specific stages, and built out the NIST RDAF topics, data governance, legal and regulatory compliance, provided some outcomes that could be useful to complete those topics or subtopics, and allowed users to go through and determine if they've achieved it or not. If you have not achieved these topics or subtopics, we provide activities that you could do to complete that work, conduct a data set inventory, who might be involved, the resources necessarily for that. And along with this comes a scorecard that you can use to map your current work in this area and where you might need to go going forward. So we include research data management, not just at the project level, but at considering things like data culture, reward structure. This is designed for librarians and other members working on this to step through the tool, come up with a process that you'd like to, and present it to your higher level executive stakeholders. So thank you to anyone who we've met with to learn more about how you use research data on your campuses. We've had a lot of interviews, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Catherine. And folks can feel free to throw questions in the chat. We are at time, but we're still here. So if anyone has questions for Catherine or for Jennifer or Mary Jo or Jocelyn on their lightning round presentations, feel free to drop it in the chat. But that tool is really cool. I would love to see that for all different projects that you can click through, and if you're not already achieved, you can get suggestions about next steps. That's awesome. We've got a hand up. Fred, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
Have you presented any of these findings at the University Faculty Senate at one of their plenaries?
We have not presented to the Faculty Senate yet. We've been able to present at, there's a research group at SUNY administration, a research POPs group. We've discussed it. We've been able to talk to the VPRs. We've been able to speak to one of the task forces we've been really doing a lot of work at the SUNY administration side, and I absolutely think that there is room to present this at Faculty Senate or other groups. So I really appreciate the suggestion. And I have not made it clear, the person who built the tool is Bridget Almus in the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development. I was able to take RDAF and map those topics and subtopics into outcomes, kind of tease apart those relationships, but it's really been her creativeness and use of GitHub to put together a tool like that. And we've been working with an intern who has taken the proprietary library and turned it into an open library. So lots of really amazing work and a lot of conversations with our project team.
Thank you. And I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I'm going to stop the recording.